Good morning. Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We are page 1268. Aleph Reish Samaches. So yesterday we learned a pretty profound paragraph where the Rebbe Rashab is beginning to explain the Maila, the quality of Kalim, with a presenting question that he asked at the bottom of page 1266 and top of 1267. Just reading from the actual question. Yesh adayin yesh lahavin. We still have to understand mehechon yesh koich b'simcha shel mitzvah ligrem simcha kol kach ba'atzmus. From where does simcha shel mitzvah, which means the mitzvah with the simcha, have the power to cause such a powerful joy, such a strong on atzmus mamish, to the point to the point that it should be that this should cause and generate this primary revelation of the abundant energy that is concealed in atzmus. Because after all, mitzvahs are kelim, are ivarim, the malka. In other words, they have some form of structure. Ivarim is the organs, the limbs of the king, so to speak. And the same thing he said with neshamas, and it's all ultimately defined by some form of structure, even as we said, expand the structure. So how does a yifla yeshish at neshamas edaka orik since neshamas? So even though neshamas and through the avodah and the high level of avodah we spoke about, what he called etzema neshama ava b'chol meidecha ava rabba b'tainugim. Earlier he used the words mesiras nefesh, and yet we're still talking about entities that have some structure. So that's the question: how do the kelim have such power? So he began to answer that, saying that the root of the containers is deeper than the root of the oiris and the energy. So there's a topic, even though this topic has been mentioned and discussed earlier in Ayin Beis, but here the Rebbe Rashab is now going deeply into it. And we said this is going to set the stage to understand what Einoid is. Not just Havaya Wilikim, B'Shamayim Mal V'Aretz B'Tachas, but also Ein Oid. So let's sum up what we learned yesterday. So the root of the containers precedes the root of the energies. And he explained, because the root of the containers of Atzilus, of the Netzalim, is Atzmusum Hus Ein Sof Baruch Hu. That's the term the Rebbe Rashab uses. And the root and source of the Eris, of the energies of the emanations of Netzalim, is Ein Sof Bilvad, just the word Ein Sof. And he explained Ein Sof, as deep as it is, means infinite, it means no end. It's still a toyad, it's a description, and it's a description that fits more oir than it does atzmus, because Ein Sof is applicable to an entity that is capable of having a beginning and an end because it has a beginning, and yet it's called Ein Sof. And he explained in Ein Sof itself, yes, it's a high level of qualitative Ein Sof, is the way I described it. In other words, it's not just Ein Sof that it extends like an Atzilus, Chachma or Chesed extends endlessly, but here there's no structure altogether, there's no spheres. And since there are no spheres, it's an Ein Sof that even there's no beginning and no end, meaning there's a beginning as a source, but its behavior and its identity and its properties is an Ein Sof type of properties. It's all expansive in every possible direction and not even defined by spheres. Whereas that's Atzilus the Klolus, the macrocosm of Atzilus, Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. Whereas Atzilus the Protis, in microcosm, there it's Ein Sof Lishpashtuse, as he explained. Okay. Now, what about the fact that we learned earlier that there are, even before the desire arises, a desire for creation before the Tzimtzum, you have spheres, and they are spheres saying cats. So you just said there's no spheres altogether. So he said the Pirush of Ein Ketz was explained earlier, means that the spheres themselves are in a state of Ein Sof, like the Ur is a state of Ein Sof. So yes, there is a concept of spheres, but they're completely Ein Sof, and that's why it's reconcilable with what we just learned now. But you could, as I mentioned, I alluded to yesterday, you could still say there's like two levels here. Ur Ein Sof, that's qualitatively Ein Sof, and no spheres altogether, or spheres Ein Ketz, and the spheres like Ein Sof. But practically speaking, he answered that he says, and that's why the spheres themselves are also in a state of Ein Sof. So the only thing that's added is the word spheres are used here. But you can't really call it Chachma, Bina, Chesed, Gvur, etc. I'm just pointing that out. So he answered that question that way, but still subtly you could distinguish between two levels, seemingly, even though that's not the emphasis here. I just reiterating. Then came a parenthesis, and the Fizeh, he said, according to this, the Erein Sof Lefnei Tzimtzum in general is a state where the Sof is Kamoi Ba'aschola, Machash Ein B'chinas Reish V'Seif. In other words, there's absolutely no distinctions at all. It's a seamless state, and you don't talk in terms of a beginning and an end. Everything is equal. But he said, didn't we learn earlier that in Erein Sof HaBli Gvul is Ma'lo Mata? There is a hierarchy, which means there is a higher and there's a lower level. So he answered the question, that's the difference between Etzem HaEr and Spashtus HaEr. Etzem HaEr is complete seamlessness. Spashtus HaEr extends. As it expands, and the way it comes after the Tzimtzum, it's in a form of Seviv Makif. So even though it still retains its Bli Gvul property, it does not become an Er Pnimi that is limited to and tailored to each particular creation or each particular entity. Nevertheless, so now we have this another level in the Eira Bli Gvul, or in Ein Sof. You have a level that is Makif and has some relationship with a hierarchy of structure, though it remains beyond and above it. But Etzem HaEr Atzmi Ein Bereish V'Seif Klal, U'B'Seif Kamei Ba'Aschala. There's no distinction at all. Everything is equal. It's a total equalizer. Okay. Now came the final section, which is the end of the paragraph after the parentheses. And here the Rebbe Rashab goes back to Etzem and Spashtus HaEr. That Etzem is Spashtus HaEr. Spashtus HaEr is Aliyas HaRotzen, Sha'olah B'Ritzeinei, HaPoshet L'Haitzil. And that's already a level that's lower than Spheres Ein Ketz, because he says Spheres Ein Ketz is Koydem Aliyas HaRotzen. So now we're talking about now arose in his desires. So there is some relationship, at least in the Ratzon of Hashem and God's desire relating to existence. And there's Etzem HaEr is Koydem Aliyas HaRotzen, proceeds where everything is shapeless and seamless. And the parentheses he adds, this is different in the Erein Sof as it radiates to himself, and the Erein Sof Hashayach El Azulas. And when you break it down further, in a deeper way, he says, Etzem HaEr is a Helam Shalaman B'chinas Gili Gam La'atzmei. Even deeper, it's a concealment that's higher even than a revelation to himself. In the general terms, he said it's a revelation to yourself, like thought and speech, if you wish. Now he's saying even deeper, it's not even conscious thought, because even to himself it's not revealed. It's hu v'shmoi, hiyuli ha'atzmi, koyach hiyuli ha'atzmi. And now he applies it now back to the beginning of the paragraph, and that's the root of Kalim. Sheresh HaKelim is from Atzum Usmuhus Ein Sof Baruch Hu. What most likely this is the Etzem HaEr that he's talking about, or else there's no flow here. And the root of the Eiris is Ispashtus HaEr. So interestingly, Kalim, which initially we saw as being lower than Eir, because a Keli is a receptacle. The Eir transmits energy, the Keli contains it, defines it, shapes it. But now that we're going deeper, that the root of the Kalim is the root of the Sheresh HaKelim, the root of the Kalim is deeper, because it's coming from the Helam that's higher than Gili HaEir. So in other words, Eir in Gilui is higher. But in the Etzem, what he calls Atzmus Muhus, Atzmus Muhus Ein Sof, or what he called Etzem HaEr, that's not even revealed to him, that's the root of the container, the capacity to have a container that can receive, a makabel, to receive, which is a form of a concealment. Because the container is not the revelation, the Eir is the revelation. This fact that there can be a Keli, and the Keli is not created by the Eir, is coming from a different track in the Koyach Ein Sof, which is higher than the track of revelation. So that's what we've learned in this paragraph. It's not over yet. Now we're going to continue. He's going to explain now. He's going to apply this now to Eris and Kalim. And ultimately, the goal here is to go back to the question and so show that the fact that it comes down into Kalim, initially the question is, at the end of the day, it's not Atzmos Mamish, because it's Kalim. But now, as you see, he's leading to the point that actually Kalim lead us more to Atzmos than even does. So so that's what we're going to be, that's where he's going to, but we haven't yet gotten there. So let's continue now the paragraph by Inyanhu on page 1268. But since this is a complicated subject matter, in case somebody wants some clarity, I'm happy to respond. But remember, we are in the middle of it. So as I suggested yesterday, I would probably advise to continue reading. But just in case someone wants pshat in what I've said, I'm happy to pause for a moment if anybody wants any clarity. Okay. So continuing on, by Inyanhu, and the Inyan in this is now he's going to develop this further. In Yedua, because it's now known, the Shedesh HaKelim, Heimebchinis HaReshimu. The root of the containers is from the Reshimu. Now remember, the Reshimu is the level that remains after the Tzimtzum, which has many meanings to it. Sometimes the initial meaning is the trace, impression, residue. But we've also learned Reshimu has much more to it, as we're going to learn now. It's much more than just something that remains. It's also the root of the containers, the letters that the Tzimtzum did not affect. So the Reshimu is going to have something that the Kav, the Oyer, does not have. And that's what we're going to discuss now. Now, if any of you heard my classes that I gave in the Kollel, and also a while back on my life, Chassidus applied, I discussed the Reshimu has a bunch of different factors to it. One most important point, which is going to be quoted here, next page I see, at the bottom of the page, from the Torah, where the Alter Rebbe says that the Reshimu is Kelelas HaKoil, and the Kav is an Oyer that goes to each level according to its needs, to each, like Oyer HaGvul type of thing. So this is going to come into play now. Now, obviously, he's now talking after the Tzimtzum, because Reshimu doesn't exist before the Tzimtzum. It's not called a Reshimu there, but as you'll soon see how it associates with the root of it all before the Tzimtzum. Because the Reshimu is rooted before the Tzimtzum, as is the Kav. So Eir and Keli, the root of containers and the root of energies, both are rooted in forces that are before the Tzimtzum. But now he's going to discuss it, so to speak, post-Tzimtzum, or with a Tzimtzum, and then we're going to go back and fill the whole picture in. So he says, the root of the containers is from the Reshimu. It's not a contradiction to what he said before, that the root of the containers is from Atzmos Samus Ein Sof, because the roots, there are many levels of a root. The root as it works all the way up. He spoke about the root of the root all the way up to the top. Now he's talking about it more in a more like an actionable level, that what level will give root to give birth and root to the containers. That's the Reshimu. V'sheirish ha'eris, and the root of the energies, heim ha'kav, are from the kav. So post Tzimtzum, we know the Tzimtzum concealed the whole Eir Ein Sof, where there was no distinction at all. It was only divine, infinite, all-encompassing consciousness, divine consciousness, that field of energy. Then came the Tzimtzum, which concealed. What remained was a Reshimu, which is in an invisible state, but it's there, a concealed state. And the Kav then comes, which is an Oyer, a stream of light, like a laser beam, like a paintbrush, that brings the light from before the Tzimtzum and begins the creation process. So the root of the containers is the Reshimu, the root of the energies is the Kav, after the Tzimtzum. As I said, we will go back to what he spoke about in the last paragraph shortly. V'hinei, and now Harashimu, this Reshimu, who Shanisha Meklola Sa'er, is what remained from the general divine energy, the energy, Kishaloi Hoya Hamokim Pone Yadayim. Before, when it wasn't yet an empty space. Remember, in stage one, it was all divine, all-encompassing divine energy, and there was no room for anything. There was no space. Now that the Tzimtzum happened, the Reshimu is a Reshimu, a trace from that general energy that was pre-Tzimtzum. It would be like thinking of the ocean completely covering land. And then the ocean recedes, the waters recede, and what remains is some residue. Some water remains in the sand, just as an example. It's not a perfect example. I just want to give an example, but he's saying that something remains from the general oil that was there before. Like you see when the beach, when the waves go back into the ocean, you see water still remains within the sand, traces of it at least. So something remains. Okay. Now, and the reflection of the light, the kav v'chut, which is the technical name for it. I said legal name. The technical name kav means line, chut means thread. For the light, hula achesh shenasa cholo. That's after there's a space. So in other words, the Reshimu is a so-called a relic from pre-tzimtzum. And the reflection of the kav is specifically only after the tzimtzum. So let me qualify that. It's still the Reshimu is still in post-tzimtzum reality, but its identity is a pre-tzimtzum one. It remains from before. And the kav v'chut, its identity, even though it originates from before the tzimtzum, but its identity as a form of light is specifically achar shenasa cholo. Umeshum zeh, and due to this fact, yesh yisron kloli b'Reshimu, there's a general quality that the Reshimu has, an advantage, shehi ma'atzmus u'mehus ha'er. That is coming from the atzmus u'mehus ha'er. He's using that expression, the core and essence of the energy before the tzimtzum. Whereas the kav is not coming from the atzmus u'mehus ha'er, it's coming from a reflection of a lower level of er, as we shall discuss shortly. The ma'achas shehi ma'er koydem shenisalem, since the Reshimu is coming from the energy, the divine energy before it was concealed, pre-concealed, pre-tzimtzum, harihum mehusa er atzmei. It has from that very core energy. The kav comes dafke after a tzimtzum, because the kav is oir. Remember, the Reshimu is helam, it's concealed. So being concealed, it can so-called withstand the concealment of the tzimtzum, because concealment doesn't conceal, because its state is a state of concealment. The kav is no way you have a kav without the tzimtzum. So the tzimtzum affects the kav very directly. It causes it to be a narrow stream, and there's a pause. First there was a total concealment, then came a kav. The Reshimu never was paused. It just the energy receded, but the Reshimu just remained from that which was there before. So the Reshimu is almost like a fossil, as I discussed in many of the classes on the topic. Some type of remainder, something remained from before the tzimtzum. In the kav, on the other hand, things were paused. Then came a light from before the tzimtzum. But as he said, the kav that is transmitted after the air was concealed, is no longer from the core air. It's only from a reflection of it. That's why it's only a kav, because it's comparing the light, the stream of light of the kav, to the light before the tzimtzum. The kav is just a reflection of it. Comparing the Reshimu is because the Reshimu is not defined by revelation. The Reshimu is essentially from the atzmus ha'er, because in a sense, like in the example I gave with the sea, with the ocean, the water that remains, the water that, maybe that's not a good. My point being is that something that can withstand the tzimtzum and it's still there retains something from the core. That's why the tzimtzum didn't affect it. The kav was affected by the tzimtzum, and as such, it's only a reflection, like he says. It's not atzmus ha'er. Shari atzmus ha'er nesalam, because the core energy was concealed. The kav is only a reflection of that energy. And the kav is only a reflection of it. Okay. Let me elaborate a bit, explain this. We'll use an example of a book. We have ideas that are conveyed, that's the energy. The letters on the page, or the letters are spoken, are the kelim, Eiris and kelim. Good communication is Eiris and kelim. If someone were to withdraw the energy of the Eris, the ideas, and you'd be left with these hollow letters, think of it like invisible letters, invisible ink, invisible letters. So the letters would not be affected by the receding of the ideas. But on the other hand, they also wouldn't be revealing anything. Whereas the ideas are directly affected by this receding energy, because if the ideas are not being expressed, then for all practical purpose, they are concealed. The letters were never defined purely by expression. They're not about oir. The letters are kalim. And as such, the kalim, yes, the kalim could be empty right now. It's like empty vessels, but those vessels remain intact. So in a way, they're giving us some type of taste of what was there before. So for example, if you take the word baruch, baruch means blessing, be blessed. Beis, Reish, Vav, Chaf. Those four letters separately don't mean anything. They're just letters. You put them together, they give us the message called baruch. But let's say once you take the baruch and you separate them again, so the letters still retain in a concealed way the potential for baruch. On the other hand, the word blessing, the teichen, the content, has been concealed. So the message of baruch is no longer there, but the letters are there. So the Reshimu is like the letters that remain. So they still contain the atzmus ha'er, but not revealed there. The kav, on the other hand, is all about revelation, and that has been concealed. So now you only have a reflection of it after the tzimtzum, of course. So now that's the different distinction between the Reshimu and the kav. We'll soon learn the chiddush of the Rebbe Marash, the Reshimu. I'm already speaking about it because I know the idea, and he's going to definitely use it soon. But this is the point here, is that that's why the Reshimu has a quality that the root of the containers has a quality that the root of the energies does not have. It's almost like saying, I think I use this expression, a shield can only conceal revelation. It can't conceal concealment. You can put up a shield, like in this case, a tzimtzum, and what it'll do is filter out, or it'll block and diminish or conceal the oir, but it can't conceal something that's not subject to Gilui and Helam. The Reshimu is not subject to Gilui and Helam. It could be a channel for Gilui when the oir shines through it, but its very substance of being receptacles is not subject to Gilui and Helam. So the fact, when you put a curtain on your window, it blocks out the sun, but it won't block out other things that are not subject to concealment and revelation. In this case, the Reshimu. So that's where the Reshimu has a quality over the Kav. Okay. Any questions on this so far? Not, we'll continue. Uba Proteus, and specifically more detailed, but Proteus Yuvana Inyan, when you break it down further, the idea will be understood. It was explained earlier, the Sharsha Eris, that the root of the energies, they're in the infinite divine light before the tzimtzum. So now he's bringing the Esses spheres Agnuzis. These are the 10 hidden spheres. The Matzilon, the 10 hidden spheres in their emanator. In other words, they're hidden within the emanator. Those spheres are concealed within him. The B'chinas Alois Haratzen, in the level of Alois Haratzen. Koydem Alois Haratzen, before it arose in his desire, he said, Gamken is spheres ein ketz. But Alois Haratzen means God is now arises in his desire, creation, existence as we know it. What does that entail? 10 hidden spheres. Now, why are they called hidden? Not because they're hidden and not revealed, because they're fundamentally not even, don't have any substance. In the beginning of volume 1 of Ayin Beis, there was a long discussion what those 10 hidden spheres are like. Basically, making it very clear that they are completely seamless. It's, so to speak, only the way God is envisioning the sphere, so to speak. And he gave a lot of examples for it. One example was actually names. Like when you call God by names, that's like the 10 hidden spheres. And other examples that all indicate something that is beyond structure as we know it. The 10 revealed spheres refers to Atzilus. So now we have Lifnei Tzimtzum, just to give you the picture, you have the 10 hidden spheres is the lower level of Aleis HaRatzon before the Tzimtzum. Koydem Aleisa Rosh in the sphere is saying Ketz, and higher than that is Etzem Ha'er, that's altogether no Reish B'Seif. So it appears that in Hispashtus Ha'er, there are basically two levels. One is Aleisa Rosh in 10 hidden spheres, Hispashtus Ha'er, which is still Ha'er, and there is element of, like he said, there's a Milo Mata, some hierarchy. However, it's not really a defined hierarchy. And that is that. And then there's the Etzema like that. Okay. Or I should probably qualify, it could be talking only two levels. Aleisa Ratzon and Koydem Aleisa Ratzon, because I see he does use Etzema and Koydem Aleisa Ratzon. So let me qualify that. At times it's explained the way I just said it, but I think here it's more accurate to say Aleisa Ratzon, the 10 hidden spheres, is the Oyer that already is having some connected to some structure, and there's the Koydem Aleisa Ratzon, the complete seamless and shapeless Oyer. So now going back to what we're saying here, so he said, we learned earlier that the root of the Oyeris is Ein Sof Shlifnei at Tzimtzum, that the 10 hidden spheres in the level of Aleisa Ratzon, where it arose in his desire. As he said, that's already a desire that is relating Shayech El Azulos, as he called it. So he says, V'nis Bayer, and it was explained, the Sham Einem B'chinas Mitzias Nikeres. There, the 10 hidden spheres are not any way that you can recognize them. They're not discernible. They're not any type of mitzias that's discernible in any way. He's literally talking now back to the beginning of volume 1. I mentioned the chapters yesterday. If you want to look it up, we talks about Esesphere Zagnuzis. I'll just give you the actual sources. Actual sources for the 10 hidden spheres. Yeah. Chapter 19, 18 already, 18, 19 is where he starts talking about it. Let me here see something. Actually, earlier, sorry. Even earlier. I think it begins chapter 15. Chapter 15 in Ayin Beis is where he talks at length about how the Oyer of the Kav is rooted in the Esesphere Sagnuzis. Okay. Chapter 15, yeah, and on. So now, and I was explained there that all betachlis say sarvus ve'sachdus, which he explains totally. Iruv means completely mixed together, and Achdus is completely unified. It's essentially integrated. Everything is integrated there. In other words, you cannot distinguish between one sphere and the next. Think of it just as an example, like one cell that's before it's been split into 2 or into 10, it's all encompassed, but it's not even a good example because before the tzimtzum, there are no cells altogether. But conceptually, everything is all in one concentrated point. Essentially, think of God, the artist, envisioning his art. So as he envisions his art, it's one image, it's one concentrated image, which if you broke it down after the tzimtzum will end up becoming 10 spheres. But right now, it's still in a state, complete amorphous state, pre-tzimtzum. That's where the Oyers are rooted. What does that mean? And that means, that means they're very exalted, they're very high, lofty state in their quality, because they're in a very lofty and very abstract state in their level of revelation and the level of illumination and revelation. So they're very, very intense in that way, and they don't leave room for any distinctions. In other words, wherever there's more powerful light, the light completely overwhelms and dominates. Even if there were spheres, they would be completely submerged within this light. So it's like when a person is extremely focused on an idea, they don't even recognize the letters that they're thinking in, the letters or the containers. Here, there's no containers altogether, but the point being, he's saying that it's such intensity by Molos and Erva Gili. And what we also learned is literally summarizing the first beginnings of Ayin Beis. Yeah, it's very clear, as I mentioned before. Now it's becoming even more. Remember, I said yesterday that I could see from different telltale signs that the Rebbe Rashab is bringing together the themes from the early parts of Ayin Beis. Now he's explicitly doing it. All this you will not find all the way back to chapters 15 and on, what he's saying here. Then he said another thing back there. So this is a summary of those Maimorim there. Furthermore, additionally, yesh be'ma'era el al kulam. In addition to the fact that all the 10 spheres, hidden spheres, are all encompassed as one in this high level, there's another thing that they have. They have era el al kulam shalamaylam emuhus atzmam. So in addition to the fact that each of them, that it has the qualities of whatever the spheres have, they also have the synergy, the synergetic effect that's above them all. And let me explain what he said back there. That's called the Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe uses an expression, ha'oila al kulona. So you can write that down. That's a term. It means the energy that rises above them all. In modern English, it means synergy, a synergy. I used before the example, Baruch. When you take the letters Beis, Reish, Vav, Chaf, that's the example the Rebbe Rashab used back then in Ayin Beis. So the 4 letters, as they make the word Baruch, is it just the sum of the parts? 4 letters come together? Of course not. Baruch has so much more to it than just the letter Beis, Reish, Vav, and Chaf that you brought together. It has a meaning. It means blessing. Baruch atah. What is this additional element that's more than the sum of the parts of 4 letters? That's called the Era El Al Kulana. It's when you bring together things and there's something that's a synergy that's more than the sum of the parts. Another example from the Gemara in Seita. The Gemara talks calculations that when the Meraglim, the scouts, came back from Israel with these very large, gargantuan fruits, so they were carrying them because they were very large grapes and large other pomegranates and so on. So the Gemara calculates how many scouts carried each of these fruits. And in this calculation, the Gemara says the following. One person, I'm just giving an example. One person can carry, let's say, 100 pounds. Another person can carry 100 pounds. Together, how much can they carry? So most people would say 200 pounds. No, they can carry something like 215 pounds. It's not exact. There's some synergy that happens when 2 things come together that's stronger than the sum of the parts. In investments, they call it exponential growth. It's more than just adding it up together or multiplying it. And if 3 people carry the fruit or the object, they can carry more than 3 times them. And it grows exponentially. Every person that comes into the group adds a certain dimension, not just what he adds, but another so-called invisible synergy that adds to the whole group, which is why a minyan has power. Is a minyan just 10 individuals? Or it's a davar shabikdusha, Eda. When you have 10 people, something happens that changes their status. It's not just 10 units. And the same thing with 100 and so on. So in Ruchnius, what he's saying here is that in addition to when letters come together, there's also that synergy. So he says, in the essence spheres agnuzis, in the before the tzimtzum, it was not just that the 10 spheres were completely concealed and united, but also that synergetic impact, when he says, that's higher than the muhus of each individual, is also there. Okay, so what happened next? This is before the tzimtzum, when there's the 10 hidden spheres. Then came the tzimtzum, the al yedei had tzimtzum. And through the tzimtzum, which what did it do? It concealed this energy. All this intense energy was concealed. So what happened? This that was like synergetic that rose above them all, that was there when they were all together, was removed, because once you separate the letters, that meaning of bracha is no longer there. Using that example, or if the individuals are carrying the fruit, suddenly decide to separate, they no longer can carry that fruit. At least, so the al kolona is nistalic, the gamma oir, and also the oir, the first level, the essence spheres itself, the Ur of the very spheres, not their synergy, the very letters, nismayet harbe, they diminished greatly, ubo ba'akav b'chinas spheres pratis. And then they emerged, or they were channeled into the kav, into specific spheres, chachma bina, no longer esser spheres agnuziv. And here he says clearly the source. As was explained all this at length, look at the page below, page 28, chapter 15 and on, as I said. All this was explained there. So the Rebbe Rashab is even giving us the source. And the Mamorim afterwards. Yeah. So let me explain a bit more what he says there. He says there that the Tzimtzum had two effects. It had one effect on the Ur HaBligvul, which in this case, like the synergetic power, that was removed. A second effect it had on the spheres themselves, that there, the spheres will emerge in the Kav. The Bligvul remains hovering above. The spheres will emerge in the Kav in a very diminished state. So he says the first effect of the Tzimtzum is complete removal, complete concealment. The second effect is only ultimately a diminishment, even though it was a complete concealment to allow for the kalim to emerge. But when you juxtapose the Kav to the 10 hidden spheres, it's really a diminishment, because the 10 spheres exist in the Kav, and they will create spheres throughout Ishtalshlus. So in that sense, they have a root before the Tzimtzum in the 10 hidden spheres. True, before the Tzimtzum, the 10 hidden spheres, like you just said, are completely not discernible. And you can't in any way, they're completely all integrated as one, but you still call them 10 hidden spheres. That means at least God envisioned it. So the Kav has some relationship to that. Now, just for the record, all this is critical because in the interface, you want to have all aspects. You want to have on one hand spheres, because we want structure. On the other hand, we want a taste of the divine that's beyond structure. That's the Bligvul. So here in this Tzimtzum, we already have here two. We're not talking about Kalim yet. This is all the Kav. So the Kav is impacted in two different ways. The Bligvul is concealed from it. The Ur HaGvul, so to speak, of the 10 hidden spheres as God envisioned, as the artist in the infinite possibilities envisioned one piece of art, has some relationship with the actual art that will be painted by the Kav, the stylus, the brush of the Kav after the Tzimtzum. So I hope that was clear. If not, I could elaborate more. There's a lot of discussion on this back in those early Maimorim and Ayin Beis. But I distilled it to some extent, and hopefully that will be helpful. V'im Kain. So now he concludes. V'im Kain. And based on this, if this is the case, Hari Hakav will achir b'chinas siluk u'miyat ha'ir. The two things. So the Kav follows either way, either siluk, complete removal, meaning complete concealment, or at least diminishment of the Ur. But the Kav is not left unscathed, so to speak. I don't want to use that word, it's not a good word. The Kav is not left untouched by the Tzimtzum. It either conceals the synergetic, in the fullest sense of the word, the Bligvul, or the Gvul, Ur Gvul is diminished, so it should become specific spheres. On the other hand, the Reshimu, let's go back, and this is a study in contrast. Let's talk about the Reshimu now. By Reshimu, who Mibchinas Hagili, that Esesphiris Hagnuzis, the Reshimu, paradoxically, is going to say something which sounds very counterintuitive, but you'll see in a minute what he's saying. The Reshimu was not subject to all these concealments, because the Reshimu never was a revealer, in the sense. The Reshimu's role is the Oisius, like he's going to say, Hashimuhu, Mibchinas Hagili da Esesphiris Hagnuzis. U'kamosheher behem ha'era el al kolom. The Reshimu is rooted in the Gilui of the hidden spheres, as what radiates in them, the Era el al kulam. Yes, in the Reshimu it's not revealed, but the Reshimu has access to that. The Kav, that energy had to be concealed from the Kav. From the Reshimu, that energy remains embedded in it, because the Reshimu is what? The Reshimu of the word Baruch, as it was Baruch before the Tzimtzum. The Kav, the word Baruch was separated, The Eir al-Oil al-Kolana was completely concealed. What was left, the letters, the Eir within the letters, I should say, the Eir. And the Eir is now diminished. The diminished meaning of Beis, Reish, Vav, Chav. The Reshimu, on the other hand, are the letters. They were never affected by the Tzimtzum in that way. So they still carry in their so-called DNA, in their hidden code, the Reshimu carries that Eir El al-Kolana before the letters were separated. Or before the letters, I should say, before the energy was concealed. So that's one advantage of the Reshimu over the Kav. So if you look at the Reshimu, you can't look at it because it's invisible. But if you think of the Reshimu, it's like the letters Beis, Reish, Vav, Chav. It's not revealed. You don't understand the meaning, but nothing was affected. The word and the Reshimu of that word remains even after the Tzimtzum. But Oidzos, another thing the Reshimu has over the Kav, the Kav is only coming from the extension of Eir. From exactly. Because what is the Kav? Think of the artist. The Kav is his paintbrush. His paintbrush relates not to his deepest, innermost intentions. The paintbrush is implementing the actual art he wants to create. Let me elaborate on the example. The artist envisions art. Envisions one piece of art among infinite possibilities. So the infinite possibilities like spheres ein ketz. There's levels that he's not even an artist. That's even higher. He then chooses to be an artist. In this artist, infinite possibilities. He then chooses one of the infinite possibilities. These are the 10 hidden spheres. 10, not 11, not 12, not 20, not anything else. It's still all in his vision. He's not yet even begun to implement anything. Then the artist allocates resources. He gathers together paint, a paintbrush, a canvas, everything he will need. Then he begins the process. The process begins with a tzimtzum, because pre-tzimtzum nothing was going to happen. It's just all-encompassing, this infinite energy, even though he's already envisioned one piece of art, but it's still submerged in this infinite mass and soup of Ein Sof. So the concealment is essentially creating space to create the art. The paintbrush is going to be the Kav. What is it going to do? It's going to implement the details that the artist envisioned. The paintbrush itself doesn't necessarily know all the hidden messages and the deeper unified vision that the artist has. So it's only coming from his pashtus sa'er. It's only coming, I'm going to implement. Now the Kav is a very profound force. It is divine energy, and it's carrying out God's orders. But if you think about it on its own, it's just implementing this one piece of art, these 10 spheres. The Reshimu, on the other hand, he's going to say, carries the inner message of the artist that's concealed from the art. When you look at the art, you just see, let's say he's making a pond and fish, and there's and bushes, and here's an animal, and there's a sky, a sun, a heaven, and a sun. I'm just using an example. Or it's a portrait of a person, doesn't matter. The details, having it, the actual implementation, that's what the Kav is implementing. Because without a Kav, without a brush, you're not painting anything or drawing anything. Behind the scenes, the artist knows what he wants to have. The Reshimu carries so-called the vision of it as it is in the artist, but not in a revealed way. Because it carries that, what he's going to say now, the klolos etzem ha'er. So the first thing he said about the Reshimu is that it's coming from the gili of the Eir El al Kulana, that synergy, that's more than the sum of the parts. The Oid, he says, the Kav come from his pashtus, aleis haratzon, because the Kav is all about the will that God has to create. It's not reflecting that which precedes the will. Once God wants to create, he needs a brush, so to speak. He uses a Kav. That's the outer expression. That's how he's expressing what he wants in this art that he's creating. Ukenoida, as it's known, that sil is the klolos. It's known that the transmission of the Kav, where does it come from? From Asiya of Atzilus the klolos. Now again, all this is figurative language. It means in the Atzilus of macrocosm, there's also Bria Yitzir Asiya within it. The lowest level of Atzilus of the macrocosm, or sometimes it's called Malchus of Ein Sof, is where the kav originates. The Hainu B'chinas Malchus. Oh, there it says clearly. The Hainu B'chinas Malchus, the level of Malchus. He refers now to Ba'alescha Hanal, which is in the previous paragraph in volume 2. Okay. So that's the kav. What about the Reshimu? On the other end, the Reshimu, the Reshimu, which is never in a state of revelation now. It's really carrying, so to speak, I don't want to say a memory or a trace, but it's carrying that which was there from the very beginning of what envisioned by the artist. So it has the Hainu Ma'erein Sof Shekedem Alei Saratzen, from the infinite divine light that preceded Alei Saratzen, before the artist actually decided that he's going to do it through these and these spheres. It's coming from before, preceding that. Like he said earlier, the way it's still for the artist to himself. I'm using artist just as an example. The way it's still all speaking to himself, not as he's relating to the art. What God himself is envisioning, and what God is also, what does he want from all of this? The primis hakavana, so to speak, the inner kavana of why is he creating this art in the first place? So the kav is privy to the actual art, and the Reshimu is privy to the deeper inner forces that are shaping why this art is being created. Shehula atzmei adayin. And now he adds, which a line, which I'm not sure what he means. Sharigama ir hazer is samtzim unis alam. Okay. He's adding, now, not to think that the Reshimu is revealing anything. The Reshimu just carries it. But also this oir, this pnimis oir, what he calls pnimis oir, also is concealed, was samtzim, diminished and concealed. So it was diminished and concealed, but from the point of view of the kav does not relate to it directly. The point of the Reshimu does relate to it directly. That's what he said here. Now he continues with a mashal. One second, let me stop here. Any questions? Again, you see it's still developing, so I'm sure that's why some of you are waiting. You want to see how it's developed, but I'm still stopping in case somebody wants some clarity about what we've read now. Okay. So he goes on now with a mashal. As it's known in the example, and this is the classic example for this theme, in the transmission of intelligence from a rav, from a teacher to a student, for the purpose of ashpa, to be able to convey the idea to a student who's not on his level, he needs to conceal kol sichle, all the energy, all the intelligence, all the revelation of his intelligence. Gam kamoishahula atzmai. In other words, not just he's hiding it from his student, also from himself. And dafka then, specifically then, that he can find it's called the intellectual energy required that relates to the recipient. As was discussed earlier. In other words, what he's saying is that the tzimtzum is not just for the student's point of view. The teacher too can't be in a state of mind as he's learning. Let's say he's learning a Gemara on his own. Now he has to teach it to a student. So not only does he have to conceal from the student how he knows it, even from himself, if he's in that state of mind that he's going to learn the Gemara as he's standing by himself, he won't be able to bring himself to the student. So he has to conceal right now, not, God forbid, it doesn't disappear. He's always on that level of understanding the Gemara. But for practical purposes, let's say I'll use an example, a malamed dardika, a teacher who's teaching little children Aleph Beis. He can't be sitting when he's teaching Aleph Beis thinking about the deepest meanings in Aleph and in Beis. He has to come down to the level, just like an adult bends down to the child, and has to be with the child on the child's level. So indeed, he of course understands it deeper, but for even purposes of transmission, he needs to now go to that level and essentially allocate seichel that fits the recipient. So he's still the teacher, and he's the one that's doing it, but he's, so to speak, misamtzim also the seichel la'atzmei. So he should be able to use the seichel that goes to the student, to the recipient. The kamay kein lamayla. The kamay kein lamayla. The same thing is above. Shegam b'chinas primis ha'er. That also the primis ha'er, which is the primis, like the primis of the seichel of the artist or of the teacher, nisalim al yidei tzimtzum, was concealed through the tzimtzum. So everything was concealed. The difference is the different elements that come post tzimtzum carry different messages from pre-tzimtzum. So the kav carries the spoon-fed, like a spoon-fed stream of consciousness to the student, and it's taking it from the seichel that the teacher has now allocated for the student. And the kav is therefore coming from that level, like he said, from Ispashtu Sa'ir. And before he said, and it does not have the Eira El Al Kulana, correct? The Reshimu, on the other hand, it's also concealed. That's what the Tzimtzum did. It concealed the Pnimius. But the Reshimu carries that inner intelligence, so to speak, that is not affected by this Tzimtzum. So based on this, also from this Pnimius Sa'ir, which was concealed, and the Kav does not have access to it, the Reshimu, something remains in the Reshimu from this Pnimius Sa'ir, even though it's in a concealed state. V'hainu, this means the Levad Zeus, that besides the fact, besides the fact that the Reshimu has from the inner of the outer, I'll explain in a minute, in other words, that synergy that we spoke about. Yesh Bagam, another thing that Reshimu has, so it's not just the synergy of the details, but also Primis Ha'er Mamash, the inner kavana of the artist. So what he's saying really here is like this. So we have the art, that's what the kav creates, the specific details. There's a Ereil Kolona of that, like the synergy of that, of the art, of all the pieces coming together, more than the sum of the parts. That the kav was concealed from the kav. Siluk, completely concealed. The Reshimu has that, but it also has something else. The inner intention of the artist that's even more than the sum of the parts of the details. Ba'kolhu ba'Reshimu, top of page 1269. And everything is encompassed in the Reshimu, mebchinas mohus va'atzmus ha'er, from the core and essence of the Eir, u'kumayshi be'etzem ma'losei u'madregose l'fnei ha'tzimtzum. And the way it is in its core quality and elevated state, pre-tzimtzum. The im loikein, because if you don't say that, how could you call it a Reshimu? Ein ze Reshim ha'er hakedim. Then you can't call it a Reshim from the Eir hakedim. Then it's not a trace from what was before. If the Reshimu doesn't have that, why are you calling it a Reshimu? And being that this is what we call, that something remained from the previous energy or light of pre-tzimtzum, that means that it's coming from the earth, literally how it's undiluted and unaffected by all the concealments that will affect the kav. Mamish like lifnei tzimtzum. Okay, still not finished, but I'm going to stop here. First of all, questions, and then we'll conclude the class here, because I don't want the parentheses is at another discussion here. So this is really real full development of the Rebbe Marash's Chiddush, which we'll get to. I see at the bottom of the page, he's going to talk about it more. But this continues this discussion of Reshimu. This is one of the most elaborate places you'll see a discussion about the Reshimu. As I mentioned a little while back, that we're getting there. And this is all going to come back to Kalim in contrast to Oir. Fascinating stuff. What can I tell you? Okay. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. This or that's Ha'olel al kulam, the synergetic order as you refer to it. How could there be synergy of an or before if we're talking about the level of the taxis arbus actus? There's no. How could there be synergy if there's no individual units there? Synergy relates to a situation where you have individuals and then they get together and they have an advantage through their unity. But if that level we're talking about, at that highest level, how could you have an oral kulam? There's no kulam. It's all one. There's no kulam.
Well, it's speaking in those type of terms that if let's put it in, you're being too mathematical. Think practically speaking. Existence is God's art, right? It's God's 10 spheres, the 10 asar ma'amoros shebehem nivra elam. That we have God's art. When we study this art, we can learn things about God. We can learn about God's wisdom. We can learn about God's kindness. We can learn about God's discipline, right? Everything that the spheres teach us about existence. 7 emotions, 3 intellect, even the superconscious. Now, we all know that you're only going to come to a certain amount of information. At some point, you come to discover that there are things that may be hidden in existence, and this he discussed at length in volume 1, that you need to dig deeper. For example, physicists, scientists that have discovered the subatomic world have discovered deeper secrets of God. And you can keep going and going and going. Now, at some point, you can also come and ask the question, what is the purpose of all of this art? You know, if I see a Rembrandt or I see another beautiful painting, I see there's a message being conveyed, a message of conveying the beauty of a flower, a message of conveying romance, a message conveying a battlefield, a court case, whatever it is that they convey, or the patriarchs or biblical images. So there's a eira elal kolona in that art as well, that even if you appreciate the actual art, you don't always know its so-called synergetic overall message. Now, after the tzimtzum, we get the art and we get many layers within the art. But what about that bigger picture, the synergy of it? So it's true, before the tzimtzum, there's no details. We said it's all one, but the synergy is there. If we were able to get a glimpse before tzimtzum into after tzimtzum, you'd be able to see the synergetic elements. So Ariel al-Kolona doesn't exist necessarily before the tzimtzum in the literal sense of the word, but its energy exists there because it has that big picture look at things. Now, he's saying here even higher than that. There's the Pnimius HaKavana, not just the synergy of the art. As we said before, the art is still one piece of art, is the 10 hidden spheres. So the 10 hidden spheres have many, many secrets and meanings on a revealed level, on a concealed level, a synergetic level. Then what about the fact that God can create many different types of art? Or furthermore, that he can create, that he's not even defined as an artist. So the Reshimu, he's saying, is privy to all these higher levels as well, not just to the lower levels of what the art is conveying and even some of the deeper secrets in it. So he doesn't mean there's an actual Ariel Kolona Lifnei Tzimtzum. He's just using that as an example to explain the clarity that's there before the Tzimtzum. Everything is clear, like that type of synergy and higher. That's the way he explained it back in volume 1. If you go there, you'll see he explains it in detail. At least 3-4 chapters where he just discusses this example of the letters and the Ariel al-Kolona in the volume 1 in Ayin Beis. Okay.
This Orsha Ole al Kulam, is that inexpressible or higher than the expressible or?
It's lower than Etzem or, he just said.
Not lower.
Lower. Is the Pnimius of the Chetzenius.
Right.
That's what he called it. And Etzem is even higher than that. Yeah.
Oh, so I was wondering about that. So Pnimius of the Chetzonis, that's the synergetic or that you're referring to.
Look at the last line of the last page. Look at the last, he says it explicitly.
And the Pnimius would be what? Etzem or? Just Etzem or?
Well, what does that mean? Etzem or means, what we just said at the top of page 1269. Yeah.
conversation.
Okay. Any other
Rabbi
questions?
Jacobson, before
Yeah.
you disconnect, I wanted to make an announcement for the fundraising campaign.
Okay, go for it. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Number one, this is Yitzchak Weiner. The team leader for the Ayin Beis fundraising team. As I previously announced, Rabbi Jacobson's organization, the Meaningful Life Center, will be launching its first online fundraising campaign on Hanukkah to help expand their amazing educational programs in Torah and Chassidus, from which the entire world benefits. This includes us. The Ayin Beis class is made possible by Rabbi Jacobson's Meaningful Life Center and its Chassidus Applied track. As I mentioned, I'm leading the team for the Ayin Beis group to create a pushka of initial donations before the campaign officially launches public, to be used as matching donations for the main campaign. This means making a donation before the public campaign on Hanukkah. This means making a donation now. If this Ayin Beis class and other programs by Rabbi Jacobson's organization have enriched your life and Avodas Hashem, this is a time to give back something to show your appreciation and support. As an incentive to encourage you to donate, I have pledged to match your donations for the Ayin Beis team up to a total of $5,000. And so we can raise more than any other team and create a pushka that will help leverage even more donations from the public. This is a very propitious time. The Chag of Lights is upon us. Tomorrow's Yutes Kislev. This is a wellspring of light, and it's a very propitious time to give tzedakah, to give geld for Hanukkah, to celebrate the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. We know that the Rebbe Rashab came with the festive greeting we use for Yutes Kislev, and I want to wish you all, in his name, a good Yontov. May you be inscribed and sealed for a good year in the study of Chassidus and the spiritual lifestyle of Chassidus. That was his traditional greeting for Yutes Kislev. And I want you to know that on our Ayin Beis, the WhatsApp group page, I just posted a specific link for our team. So now it's even easier to make the donation. You just have to press the button and click donate. You don't have to put in the general page in honor of, you don't have to list Ayin Beis. We have our own special team page. You can see how much we've raised. Whatever you see on the page now, it's doubled because of the matching donation. And now we're going for a goal of $15,000. We are the number one team right now. We're leading all the other teams, so let's keep it up. Thank you all to everybody who's already donated. We've had some very generous donors. If you've made a pledge but you haven't yet paid it, please make the contribution now using the link, and let's all go from strength to strength and contribute to this organization and make this a very successful campaign, so Rabbi Jacobson and his staff can continue to spread the light of Chassidus and Torah to the entire world. Thank you very much. Good Yontov and Chag Urim Sameach.
Thank you, Yitzchak. Beautiful. I'm very humbled and honored.
Yeah. Yes.
I have to talk to you privately. It's Yuval.
Yes, I hear you.
He says he has to talk to you privately. So
I understand. I'll put my phone number on the group if that makes people happy.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. You got it.
Thank you again, Yitzchak. Beautifully said, and I obviously second all that, and it's a very big honor. And so tomorrow's Yutes Kislev, and obviously we'll continue learning Chassidus. What better time to learn Ayin Beis, some of the deepest ideas. So I wish everybody Lashana Tova, and good Yontov, what we'll have tonight, and I'm actually doing a webinar tonight with about philanthropy and God and Judaism or something like that at 8 p.m. I'll post the details, as well as if I bring in at 10 p.m. and then tomorrow morning. Okay, yeah, we got our full schedule ahead of us. Okay, everyone, sign off. Good Yontov to you all.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Good Yontov.
So we stop here.